Well, this is Scott Ryan, and I have the pleasure today of being able to interview a woman who is now working with Judy, psychic medium, and you are?
Lisa Taylor.
And what is it that you do?
Well, I've been working as a natural health consultant for the last 8 years. I'm a master herbalist by trade, and I use the tools of Iridology, looking at the colored part of the eye, and also sclerology, looking at the white of the eye. And those tools are able to show me different things that are going on with the body. I have a lot of clients who have been to their doctors, everything's coming up normal, but they're still not feeling proper. And so quite often I'll have people come to see me who really don't have the answers, and they're wondering why they're having headaches or why they're not sleeping or what's going on. So the science of iridology and sclerology can show us some of those imbalances in the body. In addition to doing those assessments here at Judy's location, I'll also be doing bioenergy healing. And bioenergy healing is a way for our body to naturally release stuck emotions, things that have happened in our past, things that we carry with us. Somebody breaks our heart, somebody tells us we're not good enough, somebody tells us that we're poor when we're growing up, and then we have this idea that we're poor and we don't have enough money. And that's when we start to see congestion in, say, the root chakra. So the bioenergy healing is a way for me to help people move through those emotions and get some new perspective and emotional health. And in addition to that, for people who are interested, I also am an intuitive reader, using different decks of cards to provide people with insight to their recent past, their current situation, and where things are looking into the future.
Okay, so when you're talking about iridology and sclerology, as I just learned, these are, and you mentioned that sometimes people go to the doctors and they don't feel quite as well as they think that they should have after seeing the doctors. So they come to you, and these are additional sort of ways that people can get a look into what's perhaps wrong with their body, and as you mentioned, also apparently what's going on inside their mind as well. I suppose, is that about accurate there?
Yeah, it's less about the mind and more about the physical body, as in, let's say as an example, somebody comes to me and they're having constant headaches. When you go, and I'm not saying never go to your doctor, because I go to my doctor religiously, and there's a place and we need our doctors. When somebody comes to me though, and they've been to their doctor and they have headaches all the time, and their doctor has given them a medication to help suppress their headaches, the issue is still there. So when I'm looking at the iris or the sclera, what I'm going to be looking for in the example of headaches, I'm not looking to see what's wrong with their head. I'm looking to see, is there colon stagnation? Maybe they have a whole bunch of toxins in their colon, and the toxicity in the colon is actually making this headache response. So sometimes when we go for traditional testing, we may not get the results we're looking for, because sometimes what's wrong is not our head, it's something internal. There's food sensitivities, there's some toxins, there's no elimination happening. And so when we start to clear out some of those toxins, then the headaches actually dissipate. So it's not always suppressing, it's actually supporting. So when I'm looking at someone's eyes, when they leave a session with me, they're going to have a sheet of paper that's going to tell them nutritionally what they need to do, because a lot of people are not eating properly. A lot of people don't even realize they have food sensitivities, which does show up in the iris and sclera. And so they'll have that nutritional advice, and then there may be some supplements that they need to be taking. And that's the thing too with supplementation. You go into a health food store and there's 500 supplements to choose from. Well, what do you need? So when I look at the eyes, and I'm looking with a magnifying glass and a light, looking at the eye, and that will show me, what supplements do you need? If we watch Dr. Oz every day we would be on a new supplement, because each one is good for something. However, we can't take all the things that Dr. Oz talks about, because it'd be too overwhelming. So for me, it's an individualized plan, so that this is where your body's strong, this is where your body's weak, and how can we make those weaknesses stronger? Through nutrition, through supplementation, and through lifestyle.
Okay, so that sort of leads a question to me. So when the people would come to see you, if I were to come in and see you, would there be several sessions? Would you just look at once and be able to tell me, then make some recommendations right away? Or how does that, and follow up, how does all that stuff work?
Perfect. So the initial consultation is an hour in length. And yes, definitely at the end of that session, I can tell you exactly what's going on. It's not diagnostic. So here's the thing. So if I'm looking at someone's eyes, and a woman, and I see that there's issues in the breast, I cannot say to them, oh, it looks like you have breast cancer, or it looks like you have cystic breasts. I can say to them, when's the last time you had a mammogram? And if it has been longer than a year, I'm going to say you need to go and get your breast checked. So I will at times send them to their doctor for additional testing.
And so, if I may interrupt for a second, that may bring about a certain panic in them. You know, oh, you said I have to go. Well, why? What would you say in a situation like that?
Yeah. If they haven't been to their doctor in a while, like the last week I had a lady who hadn't been for 5 years. And so all I said was, you know, it's really important that we have mammograms on a consistent basis. And I do see some activity in the breast area. So I think it's important that you at least make that appointment and go and have that checked. And then she did tell me in her history that she had cystic breasts on the right side. So that would explain what I was seeing. So even though she told me she had cystic breast, I still suggested she go and have testing because it's been 5 years since she's had a mammogram. So the initial consultation will give them the information that they need. And then normally between 4 and 6 after is the follow-up. And the follow-up is just to check in, you know, if somebody's coming to me, they're not sleeping. And I've said, okay, this is what I recommend that you take for sleep. 6 weeks later, I can say, so how have you been sleeping, right? Or whatever their issue is. And then from there, we can shift and adjust the supplementation. Sometimes I put somebody on a cleanse where they have to actually do a detox. And so I want to check in with them post-detox. How are you doing? How are you feeling? How was it? Okay, now where do we go? Because once, you know, we can put Band-Aids on things, but sometimes we have to really clean out the body. And then we can start putting the healing into place. And the whole philosophy behind, if you will, herbology, is that you cleanse a little and you build a little. So you want to cleanse the body and then you also want to build it up. And that's where that post-detox is really important for nutrition and for supplementation.
What I like about what you're saying is that you're not saying that, you know, the doctors are the dark side or anything like that. You're working in conjunction with modern medicine.
Exactly.
When you trained as a master herbologist, was that, where did you take your training for that?
Yeah, I took it years ago at the Wild Rose College of Natural Healing. At the time was based in Kensington. And at that time also they had classroom environment study, whereas now a lot of their study is online. I know for me as a learner, I did really well in the classroom setting, you know, learning herbology, learning pathology, learning clinical nutrition and how we can help disease with nutrition. And to be in a classroom and hear the questions and hear the literature being taught was very important to me as a learner. So I'm glad I got into Wild Rose when they were still classroom style. Whereas now, you know, even for iridology, I mean, looking at a chart like this, when we look at that chart, we can see there's a lot of detail. The whole body is on this chart. And so I can't imagine sitting at my computer, looking at eyes and not being in a classroom and hearing other people and looking at a person's eyes, my partner next to me, looking at their eyes right away instead of being at a computer. So I feel like, you know, what I got out of the course has really helped me to get to where I am today with working with, you know, almost 800 clients over about 8 years.
Oh, I see. Okay, so that's quite a number of them. And all right, so the people, they would make contact with you, set an appointment with you.
Yes. And
come up to here. And how long is an appointment?
It's an hour.
It's an hour long.
Between 45 minutes and an hour. It depends. Some people have a lot of stuff going on and I have to have a lot more dialogue.
Okay.
And then other people are pretty healthy. It's just more kind of maintenance, like kind of, I call it housekeeping, you know, kind of taking things out of the corners of rooms of our body and just kind of being open to what's going on and what support the body needs. So normally between 45 and 60 minutes.
And also iridology, and you also do sclerology, and that's the reading of the whites of the eyes.
Yeah, that's the reading of the whites of the eyes, and this is just kind of a visual of the chart for sclerology. And so when we look at the iris, the colored part of the eye, it's showing genetic predispositions, overall nervous system strength, things like that. The sclera itself, even if you were to look at your own eyes in the mirror, you will see blood vessels in your sclera, in the white part. And depending on where those blood vessels are will depend on where that congestion is. So if I don't see blood vessels in an area, then there's no congestion. But if I see a blood vessel that's straight, that's more of a primary congestion. But if I see a blood vessel that's starting to kind of twist and turn a little bit, that's even more congestion. So I can actually measure, you know, when I look at all the different body systems, because some people have like 5 or 6 different things going on. However, I want to start dealing with what's the weakest part, right, and start to build that up.
So you can tell if someone's got a hangover, you'd be able to tell what they did.
Not really.
No.
I mean, hangover doesn't show up, however, dehydration does.
Oh.
So you'll notice, even if, again, you look in the mirror after you've been drinking, the next day, you'll notice a lot of red, like just tiny red lines in the sclera.
Right.
And that's actually a form of dehydration. And so that's, I guess, how hangover would show up in the sclera. But again, I wouldn't look at someone and say, oh, you're hungover. That's not something
Right,
that would,
yeah. They're in seeing you for other health issues.
That's right.
Would alcoholism show up? I mean, just as a curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, alcoholism wouldn't show up as alcoholism necessarily. However, when I'm looking at the sclera, the white part of the eye, and if I'm looking in the liver area and I see like a brown deposit, that's indicating that there's a lot of toxins in the liver. So my questioning is going to be around saturated fats, chemicals, and alcohol. So fatty buildup can come from a number of different places. So for me, dealing with a new client, somebody that I don't know how much they drink, I don't know how much chemicals they put in their system, and I don't know how much, say, red meat they eat or saturated fats. For you, it might be alcohol, and for the next door neighbor, it might be red meat. So that fatty buildup can come from a number of different places, and it's up to me in working with that client to decipher where is that fatty buildup coming from.
Okay, so someone to come and see you, do you get them to fill out a form?
Oh, yes.
And they answer like a bunch of, like a doctor would, or some sort of they would ask questions, about what their health is like, and so you have an idea kind of where they're at.
Yeah, like my form is really quite basic. It's basically, what is your main concern? What's your main health concern? Are you presently seeing a doctor? If so, for what? Because again, I have to be mindful of medications, because some herbal supplements will be contraindicated for certain medications. So I have to be very mindful of what people are taking. And family history, what family history is concerning for you, right? Again, even if they don't tell me, because sometimes people leave things blank because they want to test me, right? So they'll put their name, their address, their phone number, and then everything else is empty.
Right.
And it's up to me then to figure it all out, which is fine, because I will figure it all out. There's different markings that show up. And
of course, all this information is private. It doesn't go anywhere.
Oh, yeah, no. Everything's confidential. And I was going to say the second part of the intake form is all about nutrition. So what do you eat for breakfast? What do you eat for lunch? What do you eat for dinner? What are your snacks? And what's your activity? Like, what do you do for exercise? Because so much of what goes on inside of our body comes from what we put into it, right? So if I can see somebody's having a whole bunch of flour and dairy, generally speaking, they're not the best foods for our bodies to metabolize. So if I see a lot of that going into the body, and then I look at the eyes as an example, and I see an eye like this, where there's a lot of coloring around the pupil, you can see this darkness, that's all stagnation in the digestive tract and in the colon area. And so what we want to try to do is clean up that digestion so that things can be absorbed and things can be metabolized properly.
And then those colors would go away?
The colors will lighten.
Yeah. They'll lighten, they'll start to fade.
That's right.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
So it depends on how long, I suppose. If it's been that way for a long time, the more entrenched that coloring will be.
Exactly.
And if you get rid of it, it's not going to go away right away, but it'll start to fade, get lighter.
That's right.
Could it eventually disappear altogether, or is it there now?
It'll always, it's like the eye is like a map to your life, if you will. So you can see everything. So even though the colors will diminish, there'll always be just this little layering of the yellow.
Sure.
And as you could see when I held that up, it's quite pronounced, that color.
Right.
And then as time goes on, and it's not, the eyes take the longest to actually show healing, if you will.
Right.
Part of the assessment too is I look at the tongue, which is a method of Chinese medicine.
Yes.
And the tongue it will actually show a lot quicker. So as an example, if I look at someone and I see a lot of coating on the back of their tongue, that's a lot of that slow digestion. And so if they change their diet and maybe take some probiotics, maybe some digestive enzymes, we'll start to see the tongue show that things are cleaning up before we'll actually see it in the iris. It takes a bit longer for the iris to actually shift and change.
Well, I'll tell you, there's one person I know right now that wants to see you, just based on what you told me. She mentioned, oh yeah, she does iridology, but you do so much more. I like the fact that you're doing sort of an overall kind of a holistic, whole approach to looking at somebody. No, that's very good. One other question is that here you are with psychic medium Judy.
Yes.
Okay, but what you've been talking about sounds to me a fairly strictly science-based type of thing. I mean, things show up in the eyes, and you can read it, and it makes sense there. Is there any sort of a tie to as you mentioned earlier on, spirituality or intuitiveness, that this thing, is it tied to that as well, or is intuitiveness sort of another angle that you deal with?
Yeah, no, I mean, if somebody's booking an intuitive reading, it's going to be intuitive. However, when I'm doing an assessment, like an iridology, sclerology assessment, there are actually emotional things that do show up in the eye. There's the emotional liver, which is all about us hanging on to resentments and anger and betrayals. It'll cause stagnation to the liver in an emotional way. And so for me also too, when I'm looking at someone's eyes, sometimes I look and I say, okay, yeah, that's physical. That's a physical body thing. We do need to work on the heart. However, sometimes I look and it's not that I see, but I can feel intuitively that the heart stagnation is actually mostly to do with emotional. So it's letting go and opening up the heart again, because sometimes there's stagnation in the heart, but it's not coming from a physical issue. It's coming from emotional suppression, if you will. So I can then, I said earlier, when somebody leaves, they have something to do with lifestyle. Part of lifestyle is really, journaling or meditating or just opening, emotionally, right? So a lot of people hang on to their stuff, all their emotional baggage, if you will. And I try to bring awareness to that suppression and have them work at letting some of that stuff go, which will help their health overall anyways.
You mentioned earlier that, what we put into our bodies can cause trouble. Well, the Chinese have a saying that says, our mouth gets into trouble both for what goes in and what comes out of the mouth. So I guess there's the mind or the emotional things, because it can get us into trouble both ways. So, yeah, I want to thank you very much, Lisa, for having a chat with me today.
And thank you.
Is there anything else you wanted to add to it?
I guess all that I would say is if people, just to kind of conclude it all, is that if people are wanting insight to their physical health, where is the body weak, where is it strong, the iridology and sclerology assessments are going to be exactly what they're looking for. If, however, somebody is feeling like they've had so much emotional stuff going on, they're having anxiety, they're having depression, they just can't handle their stress, they're not sleeping, their energy's really low, that's where the bioenergy healing would come into play, where, again, I'm working with them to help them release the emotional stagnation. And again, emotional, physical, spiritual, all fitting together. Sometimes we can't fix a physical problem unless we fix an emotional problem. And so working with people in that way is a really complemented way to do it, because we can physically help the body by taking certain supplements and having certain nutritional guidelines. However, we also sometimes need to move through the emotions. So I do have some clients that come to me for the iridology, sclerology assessments, and then the week after they start working with bioenergy to get rid of that emotional stagnation.
Excellent. Sounds very good. I may be having a visit with you myself.
Awesome. That sounds good. It'd be my pleasure.